Welcome to another video. As you have seen or witnessed on the live ladder on this weekend, there will be graphical updates coming to Final Fantasy XIV with the patch 7.0, which of course also will be the next expansion. So it's quite a while until then, and yeah, we have to make the best out of it and especially try to enhance the graphical quality in the way that we're used to and the way that we're able to right now, until we're getting these amazing and significant graphical updates. And yeah, I'm honest with you, this would be amazing if we would see that in the next patches or any updates coming very soon. But yeah, we have to wait 2 years from now maybe, approximately. We don't know how they will stick to the schedule and time management. So yeah, what I try to do is try to optimize and tweak my own G-Shade presets. And yeah, for those of you that don't know what G-Shade is basically a third-party tool that is on a large consensus being allowed by Square Enix. Not technically, but they don't ban you for using it because it actually just does the same like you can do with your graphical drivers like NVIDIA filters or Radeon sharpening for AMD graphic cards users. So it basically does the same thing, but being a third-party tool that is not officially supported by the graphics driver company or whatever. But it's perfectly fine to use it, though I haven't heard of any bans just for using G-Shade. And I think there were also posts where, I'm not sure if Yoshi P himself, but some Square Enix staff members did mention that it's perfectly fine to use G-Shade and it's kinda widely supported and widely accepted. So yeah, I tweaked everything a bit more so that it also affects the UI. I can show you what I mean. This is of course 4K resolution, so this is way cleaner and way crisper than you might face on full HD resolution or anything like that. So images and all the buttons, all the icons, they do look much sharper and much more detailed. Because yeah, since I think patch 5.5, I'm not completely sure, but there's an option now that you can also upscale the resolution for all the icons, for all the details, the bars here, the hotbars, all the letters, especially the numbers that you can see while having the floating combat text, for example. And yeah, this is something you can now adjust, supported by the in-game itself. And of course, if you also want to get the kinda best balance of graphical settings, check out my video found in the description about that topic, which will help you reduce strain and stress on your graphics card significantly while still maintaining the same graphical quality overall, except for some very little details. But yeah, check that out in the description. Okay, what I did right now is basically I tweaked my gameplay presets mostly because I think that's the most popular one that you could use for yourself and that could be useful for you. And to show you what's the difference, what the difference looks like, always take a look at the frames that we're sacrificing, because yeah, you have to make sure that G-Shade always consumes a lot of performance. But yeah, I tried this really, I spent at least 3 hours now trying to optimize and fine-tune this. So this looks very different than what I presented you last time, because I figured out there are some very little settings here or very little preset options that are tweaking the performance, or you're tweaking your graphical quality while not sacrificing so much performance. And yeah, by the way, sorry about my English, I'm trying to do this as fluent as possible, but yeah, I'm still in practice. You know how that works, right? Sorry, but yeah, that's how it goes. Let me show you the difference visually and on the strain on my graphics card right now. So I know this is kinda a bad scene as an example, but also a very good scene on other aspects. For example, you can see the color details, the contrast, and the lighting is so much better with G-Shade on. And yeah, it now looks like, oh man, we're losing around 40 FPS by just toggling this, but it's not that much. We're talking about 4K resolution, so this is really heavy. Like, if you can get 150 FPS in 4K resolution with nearly all of the settings maxed out in a balanced way and still having a filter applied, I can show you. Of course, we drop if we're just moving through the field here, but it looks so amazing. And yeah, big reason why this is gameplay and why I think this is the overall best solution, I can show you in detail what all these do, and there's one little thing that you should set up for yourself according to your personal desire. So, for example, I personally would use the clarity as well, but it drops you 10 more FPS. If you can look at Desperius' face, for example, we have a bit more shadow details there, or the difference between the lighted area on the center of the face and the, contrast to the hairline, which is kind of resembling the shadows here, it gets a bit more highlighted. And I actually like that. And as you can see, I can sacrifice these frames because I'm also running G-Sync, and when having G-Sync, everything dropping slightly below your monitors or your screen's refresh rate is not a big deal. It's still super fluid, it's still super smooth, so there's no reason to not use it for my personal thing here. But yeah, like I said, some people have totally different setups, and it might be a big deal for you to sacrifice 10 FPS more, so you just don't want to do that, in contrast to getting these little better shadow details or better highlights inside of certain areas here. So yeah, that's basically my recommendation for the gameplay preset, and I reduced everything to these 3 settings. Let me explain what these do. Filmic tone mapping, this is really contrast, basically just contrast, shadows, the depth of shadows is being highlighted, and as you can see, it really doesn't consume much performance. So this is, if any setting at all, throw this in. This makes the whole, the HDR experience, granting you an HDR experience even without having HDR running. You can see the star in the background here that's being much brighter at the core, and also the shadows are getting much darker. Of course, you do lose some shadow details. That's all the times you don't have a screen that is able to produce OLED-like shadow details. That means, every pixel is being lighted and can be turned off individually. Gets the overall contrast much better than any IPS screen or not really OLED screen does. But yeah, I think sacrificing a bit of shadow details to get some shadow depth is visually the better option for me. Or I like to say that that's basically the compromise I'm willing to sacrifice here. So this is my go-to option here, and I found this is kind of very hidden on very low settings, or very hidden settings here. So I'm very glad that I found this, and it basically checks multiple boxes, like the levels here, and not so aggressive, like not losing so many shadow details but still highlighting the overall image a lot. So yeah, without sacrificing too much frames. That's really an awesome setting here. Okay, so next thing is really important, because if I put this here, you can see the difference on the UI as well. And in my opinion, it blows it out too much. All the highlights here, all the lighting effects are just blown out by being too bright here. So the reason why we're putting this in between the FFKeep UI and FFRestore UI is everything below or between these two settings is not affecting your UI. And the reason why I have put these here below my below these settings is because it affects the UI, and I want this to be affecting the UI. Like I said, I can show you the difference here. So what this DPX does, it does multiple things. For example, highlighting contrast, saturation, and colorfulness. This basically also checks all the boxes that we had with colorfulness before, while also slightly in pushing the contrast value, especially if you look at how bright the image is getting. But yeah, the main reason why we're pushing this below the FFRestore UI here is that it also affects my buttons, my icons here, and they look a bit cleaner, a bit more bright, a bit more detailed, and a bit more colorful. And the big thing for me now, which of course does affect your performance significantly, but I really like to have this display, this adaptive sharpening. This really makes your image much crisper, much more detailed, and sharpens the overall image significantly. It's very detailed, but as you can see on the hairline, for example, if I turn it off, it's still super fine, but it's a bit muddy, a bit less detailed, and I really like the extra sharpness here. But of course, if you really just want an overall better image while still getting this kinda same FPS, leave this untoggled, and as you can see, you still have significant difference here. It's much brighter, the contrast is much better, you have more colors there, and highlights of shadows and light highlights are much more brightened up. So yeah, I really like that setting, but I also like to have the adaptive sharpening running over this, even if it may consume some FPS. Okay, so that's basically the gameplay preset, and like I said, I want the Clarity 2 here as well. Clarity 1 is a bit better, but also consumes much more FPS, so I'm sticking with Clarity 2, and that's really crisp. As you can see, menus look crisp. For example, the character menu here, everything's a bit more brighter, a bit more highlighted, and still super crisp. If you, for example, use the try-on feature, where normally your filters won't apply if you're not putting them below the FF Restore UI here, but now they do, and it looks much better in the preview window as well. So I really like these settings. The recording one, I also tweaked this a bit, still mostly being used for recording my footage, and as you can see, this is really struggling with dark areas right now. I also tried working with SSAO, but it has some very weird lighting behavior. As you can see on the face, for example, the shadows and the lighting is completely off. It doesn't look good, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm just not using this at all. Of course, everything else is also tweaked in the way that we're using it with gameplay preset, but I cannot recommend to use this for anything where battle animations are happening. For example, I can show you with the weapon, that's a great example already. Yeah, Desperius, please hold it up. Alright. As you can see here, shadows are clipping. Lighting is super weird when having a lighting source right next to your character, and that basically happens with all the animations. You can see all the shadows are pushing through these animations, and yeah, I had some tips of how I can fix that, but it's not working 100%. So you will always have the shadow edges, the shadow textured edges here, shining through the animation and the spell effects, which always looks super weird. So if you're doing battle content, don't use this preset. Just use it for screenshots, or you can maybe toggle it on when you're doing main scenario quest, and then return back to gameplay when there's any effect happening. But I played through the whole Endwalker MSQ with my gameplay preset, which looked very nice, and I think it's on 4K resolution, it looked amazing. So yeah, you don't need the high shades here, and even though they might look way closer to what we might expect in 7.0, it's not working 100%. It's still just a shader emulation, and not a natively supported shader by the game's engine and graphics support itself. You can always check this, how some aspects of this game are still super garbage, like grass. Look at the grass there. That's it's horrible. It's just, it needs to be updated. Let's be honest here. It needs to be updated. Character models are actually kind of nice. That's something that doesn't need to be fixed completely or entirely, especially the armor here. That's Shadowbringers armor, for example, which does look very nice, and we have a lot of details, we have reflections here, something I wouldn't suppose or consider that needs to be upgraded and updated, but definitely, if you look at the graphs, it might actually be another game. It's kind of weird. Okay, so the all-in-one preset, the here I am, look at me preset is my screenshot preset, also using another color shift here a bit, but I think it gives the overall image, and that's basically just for screenshots for my thumbnails, gives the overall image a much, yeah, totally different tone and totally different appearance, which might stand out for the competition, for other creators, and might get people to look at your screen or your thumbnail and say, hey, that's Desperius, that's his style, that's his tone, whatever. And yeah, there are multiple things working together here and might actually counteract themselves. Like if you put the LUT here and then put Technicolor, it actually decreases the color here. So with LUT, for example, this gives all this very, very purplish tone to it, but I think it's too much. It's too much. So I use Technicolor, which kinda reduces this purple tone a bit, but still looks different than the normal tone and saturation, as you can see here. It's kind of hard to describe for me, but it does look a bit different, and I think I like this very much, and it looks very cool. Still having some shadow details while maintaining the contrastful depth to the overall impression. Looking like a different game. In all honesty, if you compare that, it does look totally different. Like, as this would be a totally different graphics engine. Unfortunately, these shadows do really break as soon as you're using any effects, and because you can see them, you can see the shadows through these effects, which always looks very weird in my opinion. So anytime you're doing battle content, this can look very weird, and you should stick to something with, yeah, like that. Even though it definitely looks worse on the face. If you compare the face here, this looks so much more realistic and so much more like a different game that might be bound to a better graphical engine or whatever. But yeah, like I said, the crux is that I changed basically everything, that also my interface looks crisper and cleaner because of the adaptive sharpening running over this. You can see that on Wildfire. This is personal taste, maybe, but adaptive sharpening, I think there's no discussion to be made here. This makes all the images just cleaner, sharper, and more detailed. So I really like to use this for my interface. The text here is much crisper. I think if you really zoom it in, maybe I can do that in post and show you how that clarity looks. Then you can see the difference there. So yeah, that's basically it. I'm still a bit sad that we have to wait so long for the graphical update. But yeah, let me just very quickly show you how it looks in Elpis, because Elpis is my baseline for content where everything is kind of bright. I hope we got daytime right now. I'm not sure about that. But yeah, that's basically my benchmark for when things can get too bright, and I think it works. I actually think it works. Let me put this here. Yeah, this is kinda could be problematic, but it still works in my opinion. Which I had problems with levels. As you can see, levels blows out all the clouds there in the background. You don't see any details on the clouds. It's just pure light. But I think this is actually fine. Yeah, I think okay. That's actually very cool. So we can sum up. I finally found my gameplay preset that might and should work for all the environments possible. Clarity is also fine. Yeah, I think that's it. That's perfectly fine. It might not be the brightest sunlight right now, but I think it's still a good test, and it's still working very nicely. Otherwise, this would look like in a normal way. Yeah, okay, it's not really bright right now at the moment, but it still works. You can see what levels is causing the problem here. Some clouds are just completely blown out, and you can't see any details anymore, which also could blind you. If you have a screen that is kind of bright, it could definitely blind you, which should be avoided, of course. So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you for watching. I hope this can help you out. You can find all the presets in our Discord server with all the updates that I did. So you just have 4 files to download and put them into the folder you can find in your G-Shade preset. If you want to know more about G-Shade in general, how to set it up, check out the other video I have made. But yeah, these are my final tweaks. I hope I'm absolutely satisfied with them and fine with them until 7.0 launches, or until, yeah, some big changes happen before that, hopefully, or to the G-Shade application itself. But yeah, for now, that's basically it, and I can still retain a good FPS here without much struggle, without much drops, and this with G-Sync active looks super crisp and super clean, and still feels ultimately smooth. I think the difference between 120 G-synced FPS compared to 144 is minimal. And I think the graphical quality is definitely worth it if you compare that to this one. It still looks nice, but it's not as crisp and not as vibrant as this one, for example, in my opinion. It might be too much for some, but yeah, it depends on your personal interest, and you can, from any of these settings, you can all tweak all of them, but I highly recommend to at least use this one here, the tone mapping, filmic tone map, and the adaptive sharpening, if you're using filters at all. That's my biggest point here. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Sorry for my English. I hope this still helps you out. This was a big guide, a big walkthrough and big explanation. And yeah, next time there will be a more compressed guide. But yeah, that's all I have about G-Shade right now. I think I can't provide any more information for now until big changes happen. So yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for your amazing support. Thanks to all my patrons that support me on Patreon. And of course to all the people that subscribe to my Twitch channel, or just watch basically the videos that I produce on YouTube. Thank you guys, stick around, stay safe, stay healthy, and like always, keep loving Final Fantasy.